Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 663627-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment is quite simple. I know we've heard that before. I thought my last one was a simple one, but we'll try again. So this here makes that a qualified provider may not perform an abortion on an unmarried minor unless the qualified provider first gives notice to a parent or guardian of the minor. And I'm sure when you hear that, many of you start thinking right away, well, that's crazy, the age of consent 16. And that's true. The age of consent is 16. But when we're talking about something that happens at 16, and when we're talking about something as serious as taking the life of an unborn that may be an 8-pound baby, boy or girl, whatever the case may be, it takes a lot more maturity and thought and consideration. And from testimony we've heard here so many times when we're talking about juvenile justice reform and how a minor's brain's not developed, and I really thought about putting the age at 26. So 18 I thought was a nice concession. But in all seriousness, it's a very serious consideration. And when we can involve the family and have a conversation, reaching out and maybe getting an offer of financial support or whatever it is, this is a decision that's going to be made that affects long-term the unborn. It's going to affect the person just making the decision as to whether or not to have this procedure. And it could affect the family. So I urge this body to support the amendment. Instill in family decision-making can protect and guide children against making hurtful decisions. Madam Speaker, I ask you to move the amendment.
Thank you very much for the. I just want to support the maker of the amendment and support this amendment. First of all, I definitely appreciate the majority party's efforts and concessions on our concerns and trying to keep the temperature down, and I'm going to do my very best to honor that as well. But this is something that's very important to me, and I feel very deeply about for a few reasons, especially this amendment. We've had a lot of bills over the last couple of years eroding parents' rights here in the state of Maryland. We had a bill last year to allow guidance counselors not to share information with parents as young as the age of 12. We have a bill this year that would, if a child gets molested in school, that the school does not have to report that to the parent. That's a bill we have this year, right? We have issues with transparency in schools and education. There is a lot of efforts right now, deliberate, not deliberate, unintended consequences, that are going after parental rights and the sacred relationship between a parent and their child that, frankly, the state has no business being involved in, right? And we talk a lot about in judiciary. I learned more about frontal lobes and brain development in judiciary than I ever imagined, right? And we talked about that constantly, about how we must allow children the opportunity to make mistakes at a young age. And they don't have the ability for themselves to make these complex and difficult decisions, even as severe as murder, right? So we must accommodate and create pathways to allow kids to be kids, right? Because they cannot make certain decisions. And sure, that goes for getting pregnant, right? Kids get pregnant at a young age, and that's real, right? But to terminate a baby in the womb is also real. And there's tons of studies that show that many people who've had abortions have had traumatic experiences. I was reading this morning the actual process of an abortion at different times during pregnancy. And it's horrifying. And even people that support abortion admit the process is horrifying. And for a child to go through this, right, or make a decision to go through this, and deal with that trauma without parental involvement, I think is certainly very troublesome. I want to run through something very quickly. Right? When we talk about the impacts of abortion, right? And we talk about the impacts of teenage abortion, right? I want to talk about two individuals that are great Americans. I don't always agree with them, but they're great Americans that had teenage mothers, right? First and foremost, Oprah Winfrey. And I reference her because she was in Baltimore, and she's a household name, and she's probably the only daytime talk host that I can stomach. No offense to anybody else. The other one, great American with a teenage mom, and Google's about to blow up. President Barack Obama had a teenage mother. Both those individuals were born before 1972 when there's limited access to abortion. And here's a question, it's rhetorical. Would either one of those great Americans and great people be here if their mothers had easy access to abortion and abortion was normalized the way it is now when they were born? We don't know that. We don't know that. But the way we create ease of access, normalize abortion, and use terms like fetus to take away from baby to dehumanize the process certainly makes it much more likely. So I would urge this amendment for parental rights for individuals who may not be ready to make these very challenging decisions on their own. Also because the people making this advice is not a trained professional. They're not an expert. They have no idea how to counsel somebody and to identify if they're mature enough. They do not. They're trained on how to perform an abortion. They're not trained to identify if someone's mature enough to have one. So all I'm going to say is, a lot of folks in this debate, and it's a fair argument, keep your hands off my body, right? I will urge this body to keep your hands off my kids. Thank you.